Good morning, everybody. Well, it's morning for me. I don't know what time it is for you guys, but hello and welcome to class 24 in our economics higher level class. Today, I'm going to talk about the role of government in microeconomics. So in our last class, we talked about how markets fail, and we talked about how sometimes the market doesn't work out to be efficient. We don't work out with this allocative efficiency and so on. And basically, this boils down to we're either not producing the right amount or not consuming the right amount. So either something's happening to the producer that makes them produce too much or too little, or something's happening to the consumer that makes them consume too much or too little. We talked about externalities. We talked about general market failure, public goods, and so on. And we're going to do more of that in the later classes. But it's good just to have an overview of that before we talk about why we need government in economics and why we need government particularly in microeconomics. And what I mean by government in microeconomics is a government in any particular market. So it's kind of controversial having government intervene in markets. It's always we always say in economics, the free market should be the first best solution. And then the government, that's the second best solution if the free market doesn't work. So what we get taught in the first 20 or so classes in economics is that the free market does work. Supply equals demand, and then everything is fine. But the reality is it doesn't work for nearly all markets. So let's go and talk a little bit about the governments. Why do governments intervene? And a number of reasons here. First up, to earn government revenue. So governments need money, but they need to pay the salaries of the government officials. They need to spend money on different stuff. So tax revenue is how governments do this. So the governments, they can charge tax on our income. This is what we call a direct tax, or they can charge a goods and service tax or a value-added tax, basically on everything we purchase. So every time we purchase something, we pay a tax. So governments run budgets, and they need finance to finance the projects and expenditure, and tax is how they do so. So first reason for governments intervening is because they do so to earn revenue to finance their budgets. And of course, guys, this, you can just get more information on this on the cognitive. So this is following cognitive 2.7.1. Anytime you're unsure of something here, use this as a starting point and then go and look at the cognitive. Governments also support firms. So, in the cognitive, to give the example of the government supporting farmers and so on, because subsidizing farmers. Remember what subsidy is? Subsidy is when they give you money to produce something. We're seeing a lot of this now. Governments are jumping in a lot to support firms in the COVID crisis. So firms are led stay shut, and the government will provide some sort of support to them, particularly small firms. Next one then, to support households on low incomes. So this is all over the world. I think Denmark, we're really good at it. We give, subsidies, or, we give subsidies to lower income. We provide different types of income support when people don't have enough money to support their household or family. The fourth one then, influence the level of production. The classic example on this is if there's pollution. So if a company is producing something that causes a lot of negative externalities and a lot of pollution, the government steps in and can discourage them from producing too much, maybe tax them, maybe put a limit on how much they produce. And this is another role of the government. And the middle one then, influence the level of consumption. This is, we talked about this, regards smoking and tax on cigarettes, advertising on cigarettes, and so on. education around the merits, demerits of particular goods and so on. Then correcting market failure. And this is what we'll talk about much later on, but there's lots of different types of market failure. Basically, when we don't, market failure is anytime we don't consume the socially optimal amount, and governments step in cases like this. A simple example, they provide parks. If the government didn't provide parks, which is a public good, then we probably wouldn't have any. And finally, the government, I mean, it's their role to promote equity. Remember, this is not saying they're going to make society equal, but basically they help make sure each person has enough of what they need. We're going to move on then to price ceiling. Just get a drink of water to get refreshed. So these are different ways. So now we're going to start different ways that governments can step in. And what you'll learn as you go through each of these, none of them are perfect. You know, there's not, all government policies, they set out to achieve something, but there's also some negative consequences about them. So what I'm going to do on this video is just introduce these ideas, and then in class the next day we'll talk in a bit more in detail. So the objective of this price ceiling is to protect consumers. Let's just open up this link here, see if it opens up. Yeah, and this is a page I found. It's called Talk About Economics. Here we talk about rent ceilings in New York City. So what is rent ceilings? Well, basically it's putting a maximum price. So a price ceiling or rent ceiling, you put a maximum price on what can be charged. This is an old article, well, relatively old. It's from the New York Times. You can go and try to have a look at this here. For an IA, remember IA has to be within 1 year, so it wouldn't be a good IA, but it's a good topic. So in a lot of big cities in the US, people are saying, well, we can't afford the rents. So what does the government do to help protect the consumers? They put a maximum level of rent. They put this rent ceiling. The purpose of this rent ceiling is to help the poor to be able to afford the houses and, yeah, what they're not doing there, to be able to afford houses, government, and so on. So here's how a price ceiling works. So this is, if we look at the number of units, number of housing units rented each month, and here we look at the rent per month. We've got the demand, we've got the supply. In the absence of government intervention, well, supply and demand are equal, and this is the rent, the average rent. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, this is crazy rent. We can't afford this rent. But because because we're paying such a high rent, we're willing and able to pay this, but it takes up too much of our income. We've got no money left for anything else. So the government steps in and says, well, you know what, we're going to help you out. We're going to put a maximum rent. It's the maximum you can charge. So everyone is like, brilliant. Now rather than paying about $1,800 rent a month, now we're only going to pay $1,000. But the problem is, what happens when we charge only $1,000? Well, look at our supply. We know from class that if we try to have a price below equilibrium price, it's going to lead to an excess demand. And here we have the added complication or added difficulty of, we fix the price, we don't let the price, we make it illegal for the price to go above this. So if we fix the price at 1,000, here we see now there's only going to be this much, only 60,000 units supplied to the market, and there's going to be over 100,000 units demand. So we end up with a housing shortage. So this is a negative consequence of a policy that has a good purpose. So the purpose was to save people from paying too high rents, but the consequence was that we actually ended up causing a housing shortage because we kept the price below the equilibrium price. So here so have a read of this here that they talk through. You'll be able to get the notes. So let's let you read through this here for a second. Also, I'll post up the PowerPoint. it causes a bit of a welfare loss as well. So we'll draw this out more in class, but generally speaking, this is again keeping, it's the same idea as what we did before, just everything underneath the demand curve is, and above the price is consumer surplus, and everything above here, the supply curve, and below the price is producer surplus. So now if the rent cap is kept at 1,000, the producer surplus is simply this triangle here, the area below the price and above the supply curve. Previously, it was this. So it's bad for the landlords. But we're not worried about them. We only care about the consumers. But look at the consumers now. They're only consuming 60. Previously, it was 80. So now their consumer surplus is this part here, and this part here. Then in this black area, we call this the deadweight loss, because or we call this the deadweight loss or welfare loss, because now these apartments have been taken off the market, and now nobody's getting the surplus from these. So in reality, the pricing has caused a huge inefficiency. You'll see more about this. It's the exact same diagram on your Cognitive in 2.72, and in 2.72, and then there's also in the Cognitive, we'll discuss this in class, we talk about the consequences of imposing a maximum price. So think about this: if we put a maximum price on something, all these people here now used to be able to get it. Now they're no longer getting the good. Well, one thing, we will end up creating a black market. The 20 people who are no longer getting their apartment, they might just go and pay someone above the price illegally just to get the apartment. So we'll go back, and then also there's in your Cognitive, it shows you how to, let me just go on the Cognitive here. So you can see in in 2.7, the exact same diagram here. And then there's a good example in Venezuela as well. And here you can show the loss. So this is a clearer diagram here, but you can see B and D are the welfare loss. And then get used to drawing the diagrams with these letters in, because it's an easier way to represent the loss. So you can see down here, they do the analysis below. So we'll practice a few of them in class the next day. And then the consequences. Always, whenever you're looking at the consequences of this, what is the consequences of an economic policy split into the different stakeholders or agents in the market? Very simple, is consumers, producers, and government. And then of course you can bring in workers as well, because you can extend this. So any workers that are working in this area, their employment opportunities are going to be lower. But very simple, it's always look at consumers, producers, government. In here, for the price ceiling, consumers some become better off, some become worse off. This is the complicated one, because the consumers who are now getting to rent the apartment but are paying a lower price, they're better off. But the consumers who previously were able to have a home and now don't, they're worse off. Producers, it's very clear for them, they're just completely worse off. They sell less and they get a lower price. Government here, it's quite simple. The government doesn't earn anything from this. If they're putting a tax on, they would earn. Okay, so then back to our PowerPoint. Yes, please see Cognitive for the video on food price controls in Venezuela. And just be aware in general of the language, maximum price or price ceiling actually means low price. So this is kind of weird. Maximum price, but it's the maximum price. It means a low price because it's set below the equilibrium price. In Cognitive then, if I had to scroll down further on that page, there's solutions to maximum price control consequences. Here, I mean, the best solution is just get people to build more apartments. So think about it. If you can get the supply curve to shift to the left, you get the price down lower. Price floors, we're not going to go into this in detail. If you get how the mechanism of price ceiling, you'll also understand price floors. So just try and think about price ceilings. That was for protecting the consumer. Price floors is when we want to protect the producers. And you might argue, well, why do we want to protect the producers? I mean, producers, big companies, they don't need protection, but there are a lot of producers who are small companies, and also there's us in the labor market. We're producers. We produce, or we provide labor. We need to be protected. So this is why we have things like a minimum wage. Yeah. So this price floor is also a minimum wage. So the situation for minimum price controls is the opposite to maximum price controls. In this case, so a typo there for myself, the government sets a minimum price above the equilibrium price, preventing producers from selling their product below it. So if there is a minimum wage out there, you cannot go and say to Netto or somewhere else, you know what, I'll work for 5 krona less, hire me. You have to, the company is obliged to pay you the minimum wage. This is done to protect producers, usually in the case of commodities and in the labor market. Indirect taxes, and this is some other ways the government intervenes. Indirect taxes are not charged directly on people's income or wealth. So we all pay indirect taxes. Every time we buy a cup of coffee, you buy a car, you pay for your train ticket, you are paying some indirect tax on top of that. So the moms here in Denmark, it's paid indirectly by consumers when they purchase a good, as indirect taxes are included in the price of the good. So it's kind of a hidden tax in a way, or encompassed tax. We don't really think about it when we pay it. Again, why do we have indirect tax? What's the purpose or the aim of indirect tax? Well, it's a nice way to collect government revenue. It also, we can put higher taxes on goods that we consider undesirable or dangerous, cigarettes or maybe crazy fireworks. It's also a way to redistribute income. So yeah, I'm not sure if this is the best purpose of it. I mean, in cognitive, what do they say about yeah, I mean, basically for indirect taxes, it can be used it can be used to redistribute income, because by putting the tax on on certain products, you can collect that and then spend the money more even and so on. It's also for correcting. We'll talk a little bit more about this. Does it really work as a redistributing income? We'll talk about that in the next class, or the class after. And then also correcting negative externalities. So basically, this is the tax you put on production and so on. Final topic we're going to look at here is subsidies. So for now, just know what subsidies are. They're basically, this is used a lot by companies to help their producers of a product in a particular country. What does a subsidy do? It increases the revenue of the producer. It'll shift the supply curve to the right. It makes it cheaper for you to produce. Also, subsidies are done. One of the reasons for subsidies is to make necessities and merit goods, basically merit good, a good that produces good for society and so on, more affordable to low-income households. So, we subsidize, maybe either give consumers vouchers for particular goods, or subsidize the companies to produce these cheaper. It's about nudging and encouraging consumption of a good or service that is considered beneficial to consumers. It's about supporting growth of a particular industry. It's about encouraging exports and protecting your home industries. And also it's about ensuring correcting positive externalities. So encouraging companies to produce more, or people to consume more of these goods. So subsidies, they cost the government money. So it's not like for tax, the government earns some revenue back. Subsidies, the government will have to pay some money out. It works. Subsidies are not uncontroversial, because why? This is some of the challenges in next year when we talk about international economies, because, for example, some countries might think China subsidizes certain industries, and because they subsidize these industries are able to produce at a really, really low price. And then they can sell these goods abroad and basically win market share over companies from other countries. Then this last role of the government, direct provision of services. So here is ways, I mean, we talked about in this class already. I mean, the government in Denmark is in charge of our health services, public transport. They have the rail networks down, our telecommunications, airlines, education, energy. Why does the government do this? Well, one thing is it's very big. You know, it's to leave this to the private market, we would need big investments and so on. And then also to get the right level of consumption and our production and consumption, and to ensure easy access for all for these things, we need a non-profit focused sector. Okay, and then just lastly on regulation, we'll talk about this as well. And there's good examples in the cognitive. Fishing production, I think some of you guys have mentioned it. I remember creating a few assignments and reading about an example on fishing. So, you know, where governments come in and regulation here is fishing. When they're concerned that we're fishing too much and depleting our resources, they can put some regulations on the amount of fishing that's done. Then, of course, on the smoking, you know, this is why we have rules that you have to be a certain age and so on, and the packet size are only, you know, you can only buy you can't just go and buy them individually and so on. Okay, guys, that's the end of this class. I recommend you go in and you read through the cognitive parts. Also, so read through like the way this cognitive is structured. You have price ceilings, price floors. Read this here, and then you can look at the calculations. We'll do some of the calculations. We talked a bit about price ceiling today. Price floor, we'll start off by looking at price floor in class. Then we'll do some calculations. Then we'll do some calculations on indirect taxes next day. Do the same for subsidies, and then we'll talk about these things. And then if we've time, we'll get onto this really exciting subject around consumer nudges. Okay, have a good Friday, and see you guys. And don't forget to do the cognitive questions. I'm going to send some cognitive questions your way as well.